You've got a wealth of options. So for you, what are you looking for in an org? What is the path that you want to have in front of you?
So honestly, I would love.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Bot Lobby podcast episode. I don't really know what number it is, but it doesn't really matter. I'm your host, Grandmaster Gojj, joined by my co-host, Katie Bedford. Katie, how are you doing today? We have a very exciting guest to bring on, but we got to check in before we get there.
I'm good. We've been spending a lot of time together this month. We will continue to spend a lot of time together this month because we got a lot of gigs, a lot of Warzone, some other stuff that's going on. And yeah, we just finished up an event yesterday, the Battle of the Titans a la Call of Duty, and Peeves was a ton of fun. So I'm good. A little tired, but nothing that a drink can't fix. So we're chill.
I love that. Yeah, no, it's been a blast. We had 2 events this week together. We've got freaking like 4 next week or something stupid. So a lot of Call of Duty, a lot of other titles as well coming. But today we are talking Call of Duty. We're talking Warzone as per usual, talking competitive Warzone as per usual. We had 2 tournaments this week. Both of those tournaments were won by same people for the most part. One of those people, we're going to just jump straight into it, is a man, the Wonder Kid. If you don't know who he is, where have you been? zSmit official. We're going to be calling him Smitty all day today. This man is a legend among men. And look, he's talented in his own right, has kind of come up and grinded through the scene to get to where he's at right now. And there's a lot of reasons we wanted to have him on the podcast. And he just so happened to win both the tournaments this week to set it up perfectly to join the podcast. But in terms of introductions, look, the guy's a legend, very talented, and is on the smaller side, but is making a huge push into, content creation, streaming, and was recently on this organization, I'll call it like a mid-tier org called OMiT. A lot of you may not be familiar with them. They have a lot of really sweaty Warzone players a part of their squad. Recently left OMiT and is open for signings for major orgs, and we're going to be talking a lot about that with him today. So without further ado, let's jump straight in with Smit. And Smit, we've got you live, brother. How are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm doing good. I'm a little bit tired because that adrenaline running through me last night was I was laying in bed. I was like, I don't know, I was sitting in my setup, and like just towards the end of the night, I was like, all right, like I'm ready for bed. And then I just laid down and I was like, yeah, I'm not falling asleep for a few hours.
Yeah, I feel that, man. You guys were twisted yesterday and on Tuesday. I mean, before we get into anything else, Katie, I feel like we should just let's rehash those 2 events. zSmit, kind of take us through. Let's go back to Tuesday. 2v2 event. Interesting format. It was ground loot only. Take us through kind of your thought process with Aydan. Of course, no secret, we've already said it, you and Aydan won that event together in a pretty impressive fashion, but kind of give us some insight on what you guys were thinking during that event.
Honestly, I think so the thing with me and Aydan, even in like regular 2v2s and whatnot and wagers, is like we split a lot. And I mean, I've heard you guys say it even like when I'll go back and watch like the broadcast or whatever. Like there's some times where Aydan and I will leave peak, we'll grab loadout, and we won't say a word to each other until we're in zone 6 and there's 4 people left. And it's either like we're, it's a close game, or it'll just be like Aydan will just randomly like say one thing. He'll be like, either I'm dead or I'll say I'm dead.
Yeah.
Or it'll be we're up 15 kills or we're up like 18 kills. Like it was a little different though with the ground loot, because I mean, one, it's a BR, so it's RNG. The ground loot is even more RNG, so it was a little sketchy at first, but once we like got in our groove, I think just having that tough matchup versus Husk and Newbz first round, I think that was actually best case scenario for us, because it really prepared us for the rest of the tournament. And we just kept doing our same thing that we would do before loadout drops, just drop in peak, fly out, and just fragged out. We did stay together a lot more in it, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we noticed that especially too was as those lobbies went on, it seemed like we could watch in real time the adjustments that players like you guys were making as those lobbies were getting more difficult. And to set the stage to everyone who's just coming in, zSmit won 2 tournaments this week. The first day of Jowo's Battle for the Crown, day 1 with Aydan, and then the Battle of the Titans win with Aydan and Knight just yesterday. But when we talk about that, you said that Newbz and Huskerrs 3-2 win in that first round really set you up for the rest of the tournament. How do you guys feel once you got through kind of that middle part of the tournament? You get 3-0s onto Tommy and Almond and onto Breadman and Jowo, but 3-0s don't tell the whole story, right? Because at least when it came to Tommy and Almond, that was a very close 3-0.
Yeah. When I knew we were playing Huskerrs and Newbz, and I just look at the bracket, and like I feel like the last few brackets we've had has just been like so heavy on our side. And when I knew we were playing, like most likely, like you look at the brackets, you always look at the favorites, like who you expect to play. We were expecting Tommy and Almond second round. I think I actually saw Tommy come in my chat and do like map count or whatever to see what it was. And once I think there was like one game, it might have been map 1. They died like a little early and we just ended up backing out of the lobby just to not make them wait or whatever. That was like the only game that could have been not close, but who knows.
Yeah.
And then map 2, I want to say, was it map 2 or was it map 3 with that like super back and forth where they both full died and like we clutched up?
I think we're
kind of like the story of the tournament, Gojj, was the swings, whether it was your matchup with Tommy and Almond or especially in that grand final was like, who is going to full wipe at the worst time? And can that other team capitalize on it? Because that's also, I mean, that happened to you and Aydan in the grand final in maps 2 and 3. You get those full wipes, and Biffle and Super Evan are able to capitalize on them, pushes it all the way to that map 5, and then it's their turn to get that full wipe. But it really felt like that was kind of a linchpin moment in a few of these rounds.
Yeah. When Tommy and Almond in that game where it was like super high kills, I think I had like I finished the game with like 31.
Yep.
That game was crazy from the start because I'm pretty sure that was the game where they dropped Factory, I want to say. Right around, or Arsenal.
That sounds correct.
They were going crazy over there, and me and Aydan just like, our whole thing is like we just like to stay consistent. It's like the same thing with customs. If you're not consistent on a drop spot, like who knows what will happen. So we just said like we'll go peak. We ended up fragging at peak, but like even the start of the game, I think we were down like 9 kills, and then we were somehow up like 7, and then we were down like 6, and then it was literally like, it wasn't just like 1 kill, 3 kill swings. It was like 8 to 10 kill swings the whole game. I remember me, Ben, and Tom were actually all in docks at the same time, just getting team wipe after team wipe. Like there's the most people I've ever seen there. Like I was on like 17 with 90 up, and they were on like 30 kills already. And then we all ended up dying there. And then like it just playing them just really prepped us for like the whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
Made God.
No, great points. I mean, we were talking about it before too, Smitty. Like in off broadcast, was watching the actual bracket unfold was super interesting. I mean, you said at the very beginning. I mean, you guys were on the stacked side of the bracket on paper. It's Warzone. Anything could happen. Anybody can win. Always. That's always the caveat.
Realistically, they had the hardest. There were varying degrees of difficulty, but their bracket was extremely difficult.
Oh, it was obscene, right? Like you're playing, some of the best duos in the game. And specifically when you're looking at this bracket and saying, okay, not everybody is with their duo, right? Like we could talk about Unrational and Scummin having to split up. Like, they've got an easier side of the bracket because the chemistry is not necessarily there. I mean, you're having to play Huskerrs and Newbz, Tommy and Almond, Jowo and Breadman, and then Super Evan and Biffle. Like, I mean, it literally doesn't get harder than that. Like, who else are you going to add into the mix when it comes to 2v2s that have the chem, besides you guys?
Yeah, literally, like, that's what I said. If you look at it, what is that? So that was, we played 4 duos. We would, like, be a 5th. The only other, like, duos that you would, like, put into that is, like, FIFA Jukies.
Yeah.
Scummin and Gary, but they're, like, they weren't together. Swag Booyah, who was in the tournament, but they played Biff and Ev first round.
Yep.
And the only thing I was worried about in that whole tournament was us getting to the finals. Like, I hate moving quicker in the bracket because in my eyes it kills your momentum, and it kills, like, because we sat down and we watched it, and I told Aydan, I was like, I don't really want to stop shooting my gun. So I just stayed. I kept playing Rebirth. Like I wanted to just stay warm because it really kills your momentum, and that was the only thing I was worried about going against Biff and Ev. But no, yeah, I was actually excited for that matchup. I'm not gonna lie.
Dude, it was fun to watch. I mean, it was the Slayers, you know, some of the best Slayers in the game, right? Like there are 2v2 teams that can win often because they're very strategic and good at rotations, etc. And like you guys are obviously really talented at that. But those 4 players, like you, Aydan, you know, Biff, and Super Evan, I mean, those are the lobbies that you watch and you're like, oh, this could be a world record lobby if everything goes their direction. You know what I mean? Like those are the fun ones because it gets crazy sometimes when Biff and Super Evan are involved. But anyways, great win. You guys went, you know, map 5 win in the first round, 3-0, 3-0. Had to wait a long time. You stayed warm, and then you won in the finals. I want to jump forward into the next tournament briefly before we get into some more org conversations. Let's spend some time talking about Battle of the Titans because it was a really interesting format, different format than maybe I originally expected when I saw the title. But it was Rebirth, and you guys came in with the same squad that you've been working with for the last couple of big tournaments, right? Like you came in with Aydan and you came in with Gorgo Knight as your third. You ran the same squad in YSL, adding in, I believe, who was your fourth in that one? I don't have my sheets up. Dill was your fourth in that one, and then the same squad for CDLR. So a lot of chemistry has been building up. Talk to me about Rebirth. Talk to me about your Rebirth team and what you like about them. Of course, you've found some success over the last couple tourneys.
So honestly, my whole thing, the thing with me and Aydan, which is like I feel like the worst, is we're both very like I don't care, like we can play with whoever, like it's like even with like drop spots and stuff in everything. So when Aydan asked me, because it was, what came first, was it the Baka or was it the CDLR? I think it was the Baka, right?
Baka's main event was before CDLR finals.
So
yes, it was.
So I remember we had wind of the CDLR tournament, and we were just like, at that point we were thinking, and I was like, all right, who do you want to play with? And he's like, I'm not too sure, blah, blah, blah. We were just thinking of some people. And I remember for the CDLR one, the way we thought it was going to work is we thought it was going to be you couldn't be on a CDL org and play for a different team. So like we would have expected, like, you know, if you were on Rocker, you had to play for Rocker. If you were on blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So the initial team that I said to Aydan right off rip was, I was like, all right, I was like, let's ask Biffle and Evan. I was like, because they're both not on CDL orgs. I was like, I'm not on CDL org. I was like, and you have MISL. I was like, it would be me, you, Biffle, and Evan. And we were actually supposed to do that team until like we found out more, and then they went obviously like as expected with where they had chemistry.
Yeah, sure.
And then I was like, let's get Knight. The guy, we all know he has like his pro background in COD. He's a Rebirth main. He did damage in Verdansk back in the day. I don't know if you remember his like 1v2 in like versus Joe and someone like.
Bro, I was casting. I don't know if it was that event that you're referencing, but briefly, I remember the first time I ever met Knight was there was a 50K Team Diverge tournament, like way back in the day. It was my first big cast, and he put some of the big names on skates, and it was like, "Yo, Knight, what the?" And he was like, "Dude, I'm just doing my thing out here, like try to get hit that grind."
Yeah, he and that was my first thing, and then I was like, for the fourth, I was like, I don't really know, and then I think I don't even know how we ended up getting Dill. I'm not gonna lie, because I think it was more like I pick one, Aydan picks one.
Yeah, sure.
And then after that, we just vibed with Knight. Knight was really good vibes and stuff. Like I think we ended up playing the Baka one with Knight, or no, we played that with Hisoka. Because we had that crazy last game that jumped us from like 9th to 4th.
Yeah, I can also pull up my sheet if that is helpful.
That feels like it's an Aydan staple, to be frank. The amount of times that I have cast Aydan in tournaments from Verdansk to Caldera till Rebirth, and he might be trailing in a custom, and then without fail in the last game of every custom tournament, he will have some outrageous banger game with high kills and a win and skyrocket himself somewhere into the money.
Yeah. But no, we just like we really felt good about picking Knight up and stuff, and I've always like loved Knight. Like he's always good vibes. He's never negative. Like we were also looking for like an IGL because me and Aydan never really IGL with each other. And that's really like where we just started clicking. And then when we played that 50K NYSL event, like with Danny, we were just frying. And I was like, okay, like this trio is gonna work for Rebirth, especially because that seems to be coming to like the new move.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a lot of the big tournaments are starting to air towards Rebirth. I mean, we've seen that a number of times, right? It's kind of, we've kind of left Caldera customs, at least for some time now. It's always ebbs and flows in Warzone comp scene, right? It's like it'll be only Caldera customs, and then people were like, let's go back to 2v2s, and then Rebirth comes up and we run a bunch of Rebirth, and people are like, please, let's go back to Caldera. Like it'll ebb and flow all the way up to Warzone 2, but yeah, you're right. Rebirth has become this new thing, and you found a lot of success with Aydan, of course, all across the board. But bringing in Knight, is definitely the thing that Katie and I were talking about on broadcast. Like you said it perfectly. Like Knight's the IGL, right? Like he's telling you, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how to do it, and you guys just go out and execute. Briefly.
Gojj, really quick, just to cut in before, I don't know if maybe you're going on the same thought process as me, but how much does he actually IGL and provide that input?
So there's definitely times when he like says something and it's like we're like a little sketchy about it. There will come in times like where I'll call like a rotation or two, and just it's really with Rebirth too, people are respawning, people are dropping in everywhere, and it's like you got to pay attention to the skies at all times. And there's like times like we'll be in 3 different buildings looking 3 different directions, and we'll see someone that they don't or whatever, and they'll call a rotation. So you really have to make sure your teammates know what you see. But Knight would probably IGLs like 80% of the time, I would say. Pushing through buildings, what teams we should push out, like buying back gas plays, and then just like rotations and stuff. It just depends on who sees the better rotation.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was gonna say like definitely some IGLing was showcased on main broadcast, but it was more so just, the question I had really for your trio, and that would expand into any quad, like the 4th that you add on to that trio. I'm assuming you guys will continue to play Rebirth. I don't know why you wouldn't, for tourneys together. But with that trio, like we've seen a number of strategies from main broadcast where you kind of send either 1 or 2 players out in like an aggro position, and having one play a bit more patient to make sure you get those respawns. And I saw it kind of just depending on the circumstance. It looked like each of you played each of those roles a number of times throughout the tourney. Is there anybody that kind of plays that, hey, I'm going to make sure everybody respawns roles usually, or is it just circumstantial?
As expected, it's usually me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know me, like Aydan said it the other night. Like I'm not passive, but I like to just play like smart. I guess in Rebirth I do play a little ratty, but I mean it's kind of if your team's full dead, like you don't want to get thrown out right away.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's just like these couple spots that I've found where I'm just like, this spot, like I'm just farming people coming out of the sky. Like I'll see the same name in the bottom right. And I forget who I was in. Jessie Cooks was like, hey, she's like, thanks for killing me 6 times on the same roof the other day in Rebirth.
I would lose Paul if I were Jessie and that happened to me.
But no, yeah. I mean, there's a couple times like I've gone rogue, like that end game where I had like 14 the other day. Like they were both pinched behind like a thing, and I was like, all right, we had a UAV up. Those 2 teams are fighting, and I don't even know what that building is. I think it was like TBE and whoever was fighting over there, and I pushed over on like by myself. I was like, all right, I'm pushing this. Like they pushed in the roof. I killed Smixy and Ebates or DJ.
Ebates and DJ Moss were in Smixy's team, yeah.
And I killed them because I knew they were worried that they were getting fried. Like Knight, I think, got sniped in the forehead, and he got dropped behind the pole. And then we just had to make sure, like, there's times you have to do that though. Like you have to fight 2 different teams to make sure you're in a good spot. But yeah, we definitely all switch like aggro roles.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, whatever it is, like whatever the kind of special recipe is you guys managed to cook up, especially in Battle of the Titans yesterday, it was dominant from start to finish. I mean, not only did you win maps, you won more than half of the maps that were even played. 4 out of the 7 maps was not just Team King Kong, it was specifically you, Knight, and Aydan. You guys, I think, won almost 14K or did win like 14K as a Trio 3 event. You go over to the Operation Monarch, final 8th map. You get 52 kills to net another 5K for Team King Kong. And how do you find that level of consistency? Because oftentimes when we talk about Warzone, whether it's Rebirth or Caldera, that RNG factor cannot ever be fully eliminated in any way. So how do you manage to find that level of consistency against that caliber of players to the point that you're winning more than 50% of the maps?
Honestly, I think we learned a lot from the past 2 tournaments, and I feel like that's a huge thing in whether it's Caldera or even 2v2s. Like, you always learn your opponents and have to study like everything that they do, whether it seems like we're doing it or not. Like, every drop spot, we're seeing who drops where. Every team that pushes us or we pop a UAV and we kill, we're looking at the names and seeing like who we're killing. So we kind of learn people's rotations and stuff. And another thing is like loadouts. Loadouts are so big, in to the point where Aydan actually stopped grabbing our loadout off rip so that it didn't disappear.
Yep.
And that's another thing with like the aggro roll we were talking about, is like it really depends on who has loadout and who has the better guns. Because like if someone's flying in to regain, like then the guy that's in the building playing safe goes out and goes aggro, the other person's regaining, and it's just a rotating thing. But we just really stay consistent with our rotations everywhere. Obviously, I mean, it's luck. I can't sit there and say everything we did was like, all skill. We had a couple great zone pulls. We made sure like we clear things like in spots, and we almost clear our own rotation. So we kill people in spots that we know we could set ourselves up for a zone pull or whatnot.
Yep. We saw that from main too. Like, there was a lot of fun things that we were able to kind of point out as we were going along and swapping around perspectives, where definitely could tell that you guys had more of a strategy than just, hey, let's fry out and do our thing. Because like, for instance, like TBE, they certainly had strategy. There's no question behind that. And they were probably learning drop spots as well. But something that they do well in Rebirth, when they do well in Rebirth, is tournaments like this, where it's a competitive type rule set. You're not everybody's running snipers and shotguns kind of thing, and it allows Almond in particular to just play the hyper aggro role in 1v2 1v3 all across the map, and just fly around and get as many kills as possible. I mean, they were the only team really in contention against you guys because they were just frying out. They didn't win a map, but they found their way into the top 3 most every time, because Newbz would be last alive or whoever, and they would just rat out till get those placements, because they had picked up 20 kills already in the first 2 circles. So it was cool to see kind of like
point, Gojj, right? They got TBE, they got second place 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. But
so they were really that only team kind of hot contending for that.
Exactly. I mean, placement wise, they were there. It was always one person. It was always, hey, we got our kills, one person's left alive, Resurgence is done, let's go rat out and hide and rotate correctly and win. And that's what they were trying to do. So it was fun watching you guys kind of go back to back to head, because there was really nobody else in contention. Swag was kind of there, but yeah, very, very well done. And I love talking strategy with you. But let's continue to talk strategy. We talked about CDLR. We talked about you playing with NYSL, representing NYSL in that tournament only. I want to take a moment and move on to the hot topic issue / hot button issue, or whatever you want to call it, of orcs, because zSmit, I've known you for Smitty, I've known you for a while, man. Like, I remember all the way back to when you first got signed by OMiT with Rafi. Like, I was there at the beginning watching you drop a 20+ KD in that first tournament, where people were like, yo, who is this kid, right? And so I wanted to give you a chance to talk about OMiT first, because if for those that are listening that don't know Smitty, was a part of OMiT and recently, left that org under great terms. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about the last year or so that it's been that you were with OMiT.
So it all kind of started out as like I think it was like a regiment.
Yeah.
And like a Discord. There those were like the first. There's a lot of the first boys I ever met on like in the game. Like I think I literally met two of them from a MFAM Discord, like looking for a group for Warzone, like to play like high KD or whatever. And this is back in July, like July of COVID, right when I just decided to build my PC, like my second PC, because my first one ended up breaking like a year before that or whatever. So I was actually switching back and forth from console to PC, and I think it was because of I was letting my brother maybe play it, or I don't know. I was just back and forth because I didn't have all the stuff for my PC. So I would just, sometimes want to relieve the stress of my eyes of not playing on 60 FOV or whatever it is. But so that was like literally, I met them, a couple of the boys in July, and then they introduced me to more and more people. And then there was like this Discord where there was probably like 10 of us, 12 of us, like we'd all be in the Discord at the same time, and it wouldn't be one of those Discords where it's like an Xbox Live party back in the day where you can't hear anything that's going on. Like it was always just like everyone was just having such a good time. And they all kind of introduced me to each other, and then that's when I met Rafi. I met Rafi probably like that October, November-ish.
Yep.
Right around there. Same thing with a lot of the people in OMiT, like Cranks, Gooey, Xenon. The first time I actually played with him was like a Team Diverge tourney.
Yep, I remember that event.
And it all kind of started out as like a regiment, because it was like that hashtag Rafi regiment that everyone was like, there was like two different ones, and then it was like all about sweats, and then it started to become a thing. And we actually talked about like literally in like January, December of not this past year, but the year before that, like what it would turn into. And it was kind of the goal from the start was to turn into like OMiT.
Yeah.
Not the name and everything, that just like came up as it was a thing. And then that was when he was working on a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, and I just knew like that was going to probably be where I was going to start.
Yeah, so I want to jump in and say, okay, so you've had these conversations, you met these people, Rafi saying, hey, I think we can turn this into something. What was the original appeal of joining an org? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that play Warzone that are not a part of an org that want to be a part of an org, and then there's also maybe a minority of people that say, I don't really have interest in being an org unless they can offer me a ton of things. I mean, I know at least to some degree from the back end, like how OMiT worked and how they worked with you, but like talk to me a little bit about like the buy-in from your side of like, okay, I'm going to be a part of this org. I want to be a part of this. This is like my group of people, and we can take this thing further. Like, what was the buy-in for you? What made you excited about OMiT?
For me, it was like the fact of being with a bunch of like the people I started with, and I knew it was gonna be just, there wasn't gonna be a lot, like I wasn't gonna get like be in like a bad position or whatever. I was gonna be able to just play with the same people, like build as like a group almost, with the same people I started with. So like I didn't have to really like almost let anyone new in and trust new people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Or have to go in and worry about playing with new people if I didn't have to. Like if I got a spot in a tournament, I was able to go boom, like OMiT boys.
Sure.
And then when it actually became like an org and official rather than like just the regimen and just kind of like in the process of everything, like we had like the set, I think there was like 10 people to start or 8 people to start, and then it was like we had like co-ed duos and stuff, like
yep.
we tried doing set duos and stuff on the team, and then at that point it's like you can't really do set duos when you're all on the come up, because we all know like tournaments are hard, especially for like customs. There's 100 plus players in the tournament. 2v2s, it's like it could be 32.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be 16, it could be so.
And I remember too, like you guys had you like kind of main OMiT squad, which, you know, of course, like it was included you, it included, you know, Aaron, Basecamp Xenon, and a lot of the names that you mentioned. And then you also had the kind of like Rafi Academy back then. I mean, I remember all the Academy guys that were super, super young. Like we're talking like the young boys, like 14 or, you know, or so years old.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, the Academy kids. Because I remember like we did a Rafi Rumble tournament, I think, and it was like Academy mixed in with some of the like big dogs, and they were trying to prove and find like 2v2 partners and stuff. Like, you know, it's been a long time coming. So let's jump forward a little bit to like the last 6 months or so with OMiT and talk about your come up through that. You know, you did start playing with Aydan, you know, kind of into the latter half of your time with OMiT. What did that look like from the back end perspective with Rafi? Because we all know that there's been this like floating conversation that you could get signed by an org and stuff like that. Like, what was OMiT, if you can call them that, like saying from behind the scenes to you while you were with them, if you can share any of that about what your next steps could be? Like, were they supportive in that?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, it was like there was almost a point where I kind of just had to like, I was playing with new people every day. Like I got on the, I feel like when I kind of finally split, like picking up like the OMiT boys and stuff for tourneys is like when I started getting consistently in the big ones, whether I was picked up by like, I want to say it was like last summer I started to get picked up by like the big dogs and stuff. And it was like, you know, a better chance of winning every tournament. And then I started to win more tournaments. I won that NYSL 100K, like, then we played World Series Warzone, and then it was kind of that Stu, Trey, Smitty trio that like, it was almost like every tournament we tried to play together. And I mean, we were playing really well together. And that was just kind of like when I stopped playing with like the same people every time, because I wanted to like expand out and play with more, because, you know, bigger opportunities and whatnot, obviously, like I wanted to take them.
Yeah.
And that was like when I really started to see like my potential, I guess, in the scene. Like, as much as people would gas me up, and all the people that I met from the start, they're like, oh, like blah blah blah, all this stuff, like, you know, sometimes people just say stuff to say stuff because like they're cool with you. Like even now, like I never even really saw my potential at the game, and like even being considered top like 10, top 15 in the game until like over these probably past like 5 months, probably since Caldera dropped. But yeah, I mean the goal was always to branch out and get into something bigger from both sides.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're at that point right now, right? And so you were with OMiT, you are where you are now, you've been winning those tournaments, you're consistently winning a lot of tournaments, and people throw around the subliners all the time, but you've got a wealth of options. So for you, what are you looking for in an org? What is the path that you want to have in front of you? Because obviously we can talk about, oh, subliner should pick you up or X, Y, and Z, but what do you specifically want?
So honestly, I would love subliners. Just because I've grown up in the New Jersey, New York area, and for me, it's like a hometown thing almost. It's just like being close to. I guess it was also a huge thing with that was the first ever event I've gone to for gaming.
Yeah.
It was like a NYSL barbecue, and that was when I actually met Aydan for the first time in person. And they were just like, they were so nice to me that like, I didn't even have like that, you know, big of a name or whatnot. And at the time, I mean, I guess they just hooked me up with like VIP and everything for that event. I based off of the NYSL 100K, I guess that was where like
Sure.
they really came to just, you know, have my back. But yeah, it's definitely like a hometown thing. I've grown up with all like New York sports stuff too. Like I'm a Giants fan, I'm a Yankees fan, I'm a Rangers fan. So on that end, it's huge for me too. But I also want to make sure like I'm open to anything. That's my whole thing. Like I'm not, if I had to target one, that's one I'm targeting. But right now I just kind of want to see, because I don't even know like what's gonna happen or whatnot, because if you asked me 3-4 months ago if I would have went from what I was at to Twitch partner, I would have probably told you, like, I would have probably laughed.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know. I just feel like everything, like, I just have so much potential now, and the opportunities I'm getting for every tournament, like the ability to win once I start getting into content creation stuff, like, I definitely, I mean, NYSL would be the favorite, but I'm definitely open.
To anyone?
No. Not anyone from anywhere yet, at least. But I feel like it's kind of soon too, because it's only been like what 10 days or 11 days out.
It hasn't been long. I'll backtrack a little bit and I'll put you on the spot again. But I want to say it has been really cool to watch you come up, man. I've known you for a long time. Not as long as some, but longer than probably most, I would say. And you have been insanely talented since the beginning, but you've also come into your own confidence wise, and like really coming into the idea of like, hey, I am insanely good at this game and I can succeed at the highest level. It's been cool to see that confidence continue to grow in you, and that comes with winning. I mean, for any orgs out there listening, for zSmit's sake, you can check this out yourself, on a website that I'll plug later. But with Rebirth added into it, and since Caldera dropped, I mean, in the last 5 months, Smit, you've won over $40,000 in this game. Which is really freaking cool, right? Like, you're inside the top 10 overall earned, period. There is no like rationale that you could put behind zSmit not being in the top 10 all-time period right now in Warzone, specifically on Caldera, but you're not limited to that map either, which is really cool, especially with this come up of Rebirth. Like, go back and look at his Rebirth winnings, right? Like, go back and look at the event that he just won, 35K. Go back and look at their placing in the NYSL Warzone Mania 3. Go back and look at CDLR. Like, you guys tried out in all of those, and you've been a key factor in that. And you've been a key factor too, like, I'll say it, this isn't like 100% the case, but you've been a key factor too of like kind of getting Aydan back into competing a ton. Like, he really enjoys competing with you, and it's obvious because you guys have a lot of fun on the map and you're kindred spirits. There's no toxicity between the two of you, and it's been fun to watch him re-enjoy competing again, and you're a big factor in that, and that's a big factor of why you guys have been successful. So when we have the org conversations, of course NYSL's at the top. From the outsider looking in, like, everybody wants to see you and Aydan become teammates. And you even said it yourself, like, NYSL would be the perfect home because I'm up here. But when you say you're open to everything, you said something super valuable in DMs when we were talking earlier. And I wanted to put you on the spot a little bit about, like, when you think about an org, what do you want the org to look at you and say that would make you want to be a part of that team? Does that make sense?
No, yeah. I forgot to get on. So while I was talking, I was trying to think of like what I was DMing you, but yeah. So I said, like, the whole like phase 100 and thing, like, everyone wanted me to go for that. Everyone wanted me to. They're like, why didn't you do it? Blah blah blah. Like, my whole thing is like, I don't want anything to be a competition. I don't want to have to fight against, like, even though it realistically is, whether you're not, like, or you are, I just, like, I never wanted to fight or compete for something to join a team that I want. I want it to kind of be mutual. Like, I want that org to look at me and be like, I want that guy on our org, like, blah blah blah, like, whether it's them helping me or whatever it is. And I just want, like, that feeling to be mutual and be able to feel like welcomed in and like just build with that brand.
Yeah. Like, I mean, this is such a basic human thought that is so key in these types of conversations, especially when you can leverage what you've been gifted and what you've been working on. But I think you said it best in TMs, and I'll use your terminology. Like, I want to be wanted, essentially, right? Like, you don't want to be picked up out of obligation because you play with Aydan all the time. It's like, oh, NYSL is obligated to pick Smit up. Like, that's not the case. You want to be wanted. And so if it's not NYSL and it's somebody else, let's say it's, who knows, maybe LAG says you've got to start playing with Gary now or something like that. Like, but they really, really, really want you and push for you and promote you and put you on. Like, that's something that's, makes a ton of sense to want. Because then, you know, that org will really promote you because they want you, rather than, oh, it's obligation, we picked the guy up, he's just there, right? I really like the way you said that, and what you said about the phase 100 thing is totally fair as well, especially at your level. Now, there's a lot of people that haven't gotten to your level that are on the grind, that, you know, are averaging 3 viewers or anything like that. And this will be my last thought, and then we'll transition. But like, going back through your story and your grind and your come up, what was like just the one key takeaway from your come up and your grind that you can look back to and say, hey, this was what helped me be successful and set me up to grow? Of course, being Aydan's duo, whatever, that's fine. But like, what was the one key factor you look back on and say, I did that right, and that's part of the reason, if not most of the reason, I'm here today where I am at?
I feel like everyone has their different reasons,
right?
Especially because certain people go for content, certain people go for whatever, they're just being a funny streamer. Like, everyone's different. What's definitely set me up, I just feel like, is literally just in my head. I'm such a competitive person, and I mean, people still see it now. Like, people literally, like, sitting in chat right now know that they've been on my tail to get on content for months.
Yeah.
And as much as I want to do it, it's just every tournament I just want to play in, because I don't know, for me, it's like, I'd rather be winning than doing something that, like, I mean, it's winning in a different way if you were to do content and stuff. But for me, like, if I could do this the whole time, I would completely keep doing this.
Yeah. Just win and compete, win and compete, win and compete, win and compete.
And that was literally the first ever. I've never played competitive Call of Duty before Warzone. Like, I've never played a wager on S&D. I never played competitive S&D. I never played anything like that. Mm-hmm. I was just that little sweaty pub kid that we run into in 2v2s. That's just like a 4 KD that doesn't stream or anything. But so the first ever tournaments I played in were like the MFAM gauntlets back in the day, and it was like we got like 4th, 5th, and or 4th and 5th, and that was like KD capped at the time, and that was that was like me with 2 of the boys that were like cracked out, like one was like a 2.1 KD and one was like I think a 2.8 at the time. I forget what the KD cap was because I was like a 5 at the time. So and that like was like, whoa, like, okay, I've been streaming for a month, not even, like, just here and there. And that's where I'm placing right now against the best of the best. And then it was that August I qualified for one of Teep's 15Ks, 2v2s, and we came in and that was when they actually like seeded people based off of, they kind of invited the same people back to the tournaments, or based it off of like who they thought whatever. I think Aydan and Mutex won the tournament before, so they were the 1 seed. That was the time they were a duo. So it was Aydan and Mutex. Symphony and Huskerrs were still playing. I think it was Dez and a track.
Yeah, Dez and a track. Yeah, they duoed for a while.
Belk and Destroy, Jukies and Delio. So it was like just a lot of like Nick and Swag were in it. It was a lot of like just people you see now, and either half of them don't play comp anymore, or half of them split up. So yeah, we were the 16th seed. First round, we have Aydan and Mutex. So Aydan, who I used to watch like playing Fortnite and stuff growing up, like it was like, whoa, like this is crazy. Like 2 months in, and then we actually ended up getting 2nd in that tournament, in like my first ever 2v2 tournament. I've literally never played like a 2v2 format thing ever. And we ended up getting like 2nd in that. So that was when I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dang, that's crazy.
No, I mean, stuff like that. It's amazing to look back and see kind of what were those linchpin moments, what were those moments that put you on a path to, you know, where you are right now. And well, where you are right now is one of the best in the game. Again, guys, if you're coming in now and you're unfamiliar, Smitty went back-to-back in wins today, whether it's kill race, this week, whether it is a trios rebirth tournament. He's been winning them all. And what that means is that you kind of have some of those very high level insights into competitive Warzone as a whole that a lot of other people might not have, because you know what it's like to win in different formats. You know what it's like to lose in different formats. And you've been here kind of through some of the evolutions of competitive Warzone as well. So when you look at Warzone right now, what are your thoughts on the current state of Warzone? And actually, when it comes to not only that, what your thoughts are on the current state, what would you like to see in the future of competitive as we get closer to Warzone 2?
I can't say competitive's at its best right now. I mean, I don't think anyone can agree or will disagree. It's gonna be, honestly, I hope it kind of switches towards Rebirth, and that might be a little biased based off of the way I'm playing on Rebirth, but I feel like just the Rebirth customs have been starting so easily. There's very minimal like disconnections or resets or whatever. Like, obviously I know the CDLR was like a pub, so everyone queued in.
Yeah, sure.
That would be cool if they could do that for like any event over a certain amount of money or whatever, like if it's whether it's over 25k or 50k, especially with it, I believe most of the tournaments are sponsored by Activision. So like I feel like that would be a huge thing, because it leaves, you know, people to not sit there and talk to their chat and not realize that they haven't been in the lobby for 25 minutes and they have to reset the lobby now.
Yeah.
Caldera is, I actually, as much as people like bash on Caldera, I actually really enjoy the map. It has more of like a BR feel to it, I guess. And for 2v2s and stuff, it's just like, you take out helis and 2v2s on Verdansk, like, you're like, ugh. Like, that map was, with no helis in 2v2s, was like not very, not the best. But with balloons and stuff, like, I think if they could literally just stick to like maybe one Caldera customs here and there, not max lobby, because that obviously makes the lobbies all slow-mo and stuff, and Rebirth and 2v2s, because from what I've heard, and I'm probably sure you guys could probably see it too, Rebirth and 2v2s are like every viewer's favorite formats too.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like if the players enjoy it too, which I feel like for the most part, I haven't really heard bad talk about Rebirth. I feel like that would be very cool. And Rebirth is very, it's a much smaller map, and it's a lot easier to have like a more competitive format, I feel like, on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. So you're basically saying, let's stick to what we're currently at right now, which is Rebirth and 2v2s. An occasional Caldera custom would be fun with somewhere around like 100 players or so. You know, keep the tournaments flowing, but you like the way Rebirth is kind of taking the main stage right now from a player perspective too, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like when you think about Warzone comp scene, you it's essentially co-streams all the way through. So each of the individual streamers has all of their viewers, and you want to entertain those viewers. It's not just the main broadcast. And when you're sitting in a customs waiting on a map to load in for 5 minutes, and then it resets and it's another 5 minutes, like 10 minutes of downtime, like unless you're a just chatting god, can get really boring for viewers. So I get that perspective for sure, and I don't mind it either. I have fun casting Rebirth. I have fun casting 2v2s. It's essentially like Katie and I just get to like yell at each other and make fun of each other while watching some of the best gameplay that we could possibly see, where you just slay bots all day for like 9 hours straight. Like, what, I can't ask for anything better than that. But in terms of like Warzone 2 and what you would love to see for the comp scene in Warzone 2, is there any like specific changes you'd love to see with Warzone 2 that would affect the competitive scene directly, whether it's a you know, like a more league based like organizational focus on competitive scene, or more you know, different types of aspects they could bring to the game to help?
I mean, obviously, I think I speak on behalf of everyone. A very good anti-cheat,
Yeah.
just so that this stuff can stop. I mean, definitely, I'd assume there's going to be a new map regardless.
Sure. Yep.
For like organization, I think that would be really cool. I was even thinking like the same thing for like Rebirth. If there's like a CD, like they did the CDLR, if you know, if there was all the, how many CDL teams are there? There are 12.
12.
So if they were to do that, it would be what, 12 trios technically?
Yep. You could run a trios Rebirth tournament with 12, or you could just make it 14 orgs, or however you would like to do it. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of issues that come with that, but yeah, sure, yeah, totally fair. You could run organizational based stuff.
Just like, but I mean, realistically, I don't see that happening. A ranked like system is obviously my number one. Anti-cheat ranked, top people in the ranked brackets and stuff. Because at that point, you're literally playing customs. You're queuing into custom lobbies the whole time, and you don't have to wait for people. You're playing against people like, and you could have the pubs like set up too. You could have like the separate playlist, kind of just like how other games do it. And you could still run, if you want to run your 2v2s on that, you can. Because with that, I feel like people can get that skill base where they think everything should be skill based matchmaking out of their head. Because that realistically probably will never happen, because it's like that will kill the player base. If they do a ranked and have it that way, and then I personally want to see more lands. Obviously, I know with COVID and stuff, it's tough. But lands, I feel like just the energy and stuff is just a completely different thing. You'll see the people that, you know, can't play in front of a crowd or get nervous, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, just
yeah,
all
yeah.
that. And just even just to be able to experience that and like that energy and stuff.
I know we definitely have lands in the works in the pipeline. Obviously, things like lands bring a order of magnitude more complications and expenses to be able to implement, and we can't speak for Activision and what they want to do with competitive Warzone, but I'm sure we all agree on that. More lands, getting people in the same room, getting people playing together, is kind of the most optimal scenario for all of us, and it's more exciting, right? And we talk about, instead of the co-stream problem we can sometimes get, well, all of those viewers are in that main broadcast all in one spot, talking with each other. And so I wonder then, zSmit, do you have any and I'm not talking maybe from a structural standpoint, but do you have any competitive pet peeves? Can be behavior, situations that happen, anything when you're in these tournaments that really grinds your gears?
So I guess this kind of falls under, like, I hope there's more of a way besides paying out everyone, like, because that's one way where people don't give up in a tournament. I think the Baka Bros actually did a really good job with it. I think they paid individual per map and per placement for like the overall.
Yes.
Which I thought was huge. But my biggest thing is when people either quit mid tourney, because I've seen it happen. There's people that just complain about invites and, you know, they want these opportunities and stuff, and they'll just back out of a tourney, or they just like give up. And some people just, honestly, when people don't play to win the tournament is my biggest pet peeve. Like, if we're like, you know, some people, we've had people like try to chalk our games and stuff that aren't in contention. Like, I mean, obviously it all happens because it's BR, but just, I wish there was more of like a way for everyone to be playing for the same thing. Because I mean, I think we all know that some people load into these tournaments and just think to themselves that they don't have a chance in winning, but reality, they all do.
Yeah, right. Like, I think that point was crucial.
Rules, Gojj, kind of help incentivize that, though, right? Like the way Baka Bros did it, what zSmit just mentioned, is like, well, if certain teams, it's just a fact, certain teams are going to have an extremely difficult, if not impossible, time winning in tournaments that are overall placement and you get paid out for first through third. There's just going to be teams who are never going to be able to get there. But when you have something where each map has various degrees of payouts, zSmit, you're basically saying, and I would agree, it gives everyone a chance in that moment and keeps them kind of engaged with what's happening and has that hope, so that they're not just sitting there saying, what am I doing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, this last tournament didn't necessarily like do that. There was a way to win money, but it didn't really matter how you personally did per map. overall it kind of mattered because you wanted King Kong's team to win, so you needed your points, especially the people at the bottom. Like if the people at the bottom, like Sparrows, winning a map was huge for Team King Kong because they were so low down on the leaderboard that points bolstered came out of kind of nowhere and pushed you guys ahead of Godzilla. But yeah, little ways to incentivize people to continue their playing is nice. However, they shouldn't need it, right? Like people backing out of tournaments, it's like the cardinal sin of the tournament scene. If you're back, unless you're like, I mean, there's really no excuse ever to back out of a tournament unless you have some like medical emergency or something. But like I've seen the biggest players in the game back out of tournaments and not get punished for it because they can't, the tournament organizers can't really afford to. But if you're especially if you're a small or a mid-tier streamer and you start backing out of tourneys, like you're gone. Like get out, you're not coming back. Like that is the worst situation to be in because it can ruin the rest of the people in the tournament's game, especially if you're at the top fighting for kills. Like it's so frustrating. So it's hard to really like execute it well, but I think you're right. Like the best way to do that is pay per map. So like even if you're legit at the bottom of the leaderboard, like play to win, right? Like you can win that map, you can win $1,000 for your team or whatever it is. But I really liked how I don't like the one complaint I have about Rebirth tournaments, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on this, is when the tournament provider pays out per map more than the overall event placements.
I agree.
It just kind of like de-incentivizes people to like play the actual overall tournament. It's more about just winning the map, and winning the map is all that matters, which means you're not going to be going for kills as often if you're really trying to maximize your payout.
Yeah. I definitely think like obviously I know you just recently had that like the meeting or whatever with all the players on formats and rules and stuff. I definitely think like I agree with that because I personally like when I would see like there was like a certain tourney or whatever, and then I'm like, all right, like this would be cool, like we got a God Squad ready for it, and then I join the Discord, I look at the format and I'm just like ready to throw up. I'm like, oh god, like what am I about to play?
Yeah.
Because one, it's just like it's another thing where it's just it doesn't competitive should be fun in a way. Like I feel like in most things, like everywhere, whether it's sports or whatnot, like people that are the best at what they do definitely have fun with it. I mean the CDL too, like it's fun. It seems fun. I mean, to me, it's fun to watch, but when like no one wants to watch people sit in a building.
Yeah.
Or against the best of the best because they have to based off of the format. If you choose to, because the format is like, if it's kill incentive and you just choose it to win the map, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, I definitely think the overall placement is way more impressive than winning one map.
Yeah,
I mean it is, and that's kind of the cost you have to say. I agree. Overall placement, that is going to weigh far more heavily when you're looking at it from purely the competitive aspect. When you do map per map, it is more engaging for players who probably aren't ever going to get into that top 3, and maybe does, at least in my opinion as a caster, it does make the ending of every individual map much more exciting to watch because there is that opportunity for a team that hasn't won or a team to go back to back to be able to start racking up that cash as you watch. But I think that also gets into that broader discussion of what does Activision want this to be? Do they want these tournaments to be fully competitive? Do they want these tournaments to be fully content? Do they want them to be a mix? And if so, how does that discussion impact what we're talking about right now, right? Versus those overall placements or that per map. I think a lot of that really is our question mark on kind of the direction Activision wants it to go in. And if that's going to get communicated, I don't know. But I know it absolutely does play a role in how these formats and how these different tournaments take shape.
Yeah, I want to jump in here too, because like obviously Katie and I are very biased because as casters, like we want to see the top competitive Warzone, whatever that looks like, because we have a lot of fun casting competitive Warzone. And if there were a functioning caster mode, like my personal preference is Caldera Customs every single time because the storylines that we're able to paint from the main broadcast, if we have really good observers, is fantastic. The problem is most streamers or most viewers of the tournament will watch their individual streamer, and you're right, especially in Caldera Customs, there is a lot more slower gameplay, and you have 20 minutes of downtime between each lobby, hopefully less. But what would I'm gonna yop this question from Rafi in chat. I'll give him a shout out. We were talking about you earlier, Rafi. You're a legend. But what do you think, in your perspective, as we kind of close this out, would help the customs worlds besides lands? Of course, custom lands would work so well because the downtime, you're in person, you could see players interacting, you could run actual interviews with players without it being a technical like complete catastrophe. Like all of that would kill it. But for online customs to work, what do you think needs to happen for online customs that see some success and players actually enjoy them? That your answer? You have no idea.
It's a big question, so it's fine if so. Like my spiel just now, right? Like I don't even have an answer for it. Sometimes you just got to talk about it, you know?
I just want to say like 2 more huge things I feel like would be if you could like have customization to a private lobby, change the guns on the like if you're gonna do bans, don't have things that you could pick up on the ground. Like if you could literally change what guns you can grab and have like stuff like literally limited, or change the ground loot, and also I mean, for your guys' benefit, like a codcaster thing, you could literally fly around like an orb, and because I feel like the best thing about the Fortnite days, we're seeing like Aydan and Nick land both tilted, and seeing like their names from up above, like seeing them go at each other with the health and everything is like, just that would make it so much more entertaining. And like you were saying with the watching individual streamers POVs, the reason for that is because there's no other way to watch the game than watching one individual player.
Well, and that's such a huge point, and it all circles back again to the question we can't necessarily answer of what does Activision and Call of Duty want Warzone events to be. And if they want them to lean more in this competitive direction, then a lot of what zSmit's talking about needs to be implemented, just those kind of basic standards for the ability for TOs and casters to observe and commentate the game, and those quality of life updates for players themselves, like you said, kind of having that access within the game to determine what the ground loot is, or have a competitive custom mode that has only those specific guns. But it's a question we can't answer, right? We don't know if they want it to go in that direction. And a lot of those potential additions and quality of life upgrades aren't going to happen until Warzone 2 as well. So I think it's so important to have these discussions to let them know what we care about, what the players like Smitty care about as they prepare for Warzone 2. I know Baka Bros, we kind of covered that. Gojj, Baka Bros had a discussion with kind of dev side, I think, as well as Shanice from Activision about some of this, and they were taking those notes, right? They were listening to everything that we were saying, and I know that they will continue to. So we'll have to see what happens. But a lot of that really just depends on whatever ends up getting implemented in Warzone 2. But I think, wow, Gojj, just imagine that podcaster. Oh, that'd be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I've been dreaming about it since day one. People that have known me since the beginning, and somebody, resub for 2 years, literally 2 years ago, I was saying the exact same thing. Like, it's been that long, which is just insane to think about. But you're totally right, Katie. It's Warzone being content forward or content focused means those things are not necessarily on the top of the priority list, which is totally fair from the Activision perspective. And I'm hoping that continues to change going forward with some of the conversations that we'll have later. But zSmit, man, this was a great conversation. Thanks for kind of providing some perspective on your backdrop and your come up and your time with OMiT and what you're looking for in future orgs. Is there anything you'd like to close out on? Maybe your last selling point, should there be an org listening right now?
Honestly, I'm ready to just keep getting bigger. I'm about to make like a huge content push, because definitely, obviously, there's not too many of these big tourneys, and some of these little tourneys like is just, hard to play the game for fun. And I feel like if I focus content, it'll help me grow literally everywhere, even more than I already am. And just hopefully be able to just keep getting bigger and keep winning.
I love
Well, I don't think you have to worry about continuing to win because that seems to be all you do right now. And I imagine that's what you're going to continue to do. But seriously, Smee, I mean, watching the come up, it's been incredible. Seeing, I think, some of the kind of wholesome and more down to earth players in the scene getting, you know, what they very much so deserve and has worked for is also awesome. So a big congratulations to you. And something that Gojj said that earlier that I want to echo, I thought was a great point is the synergy that you and Aydan have and kind of help reigniting that spark of him wanting to play Warzone and wanting to play competitive Warzone has been really great to see. So I wish nothing but the best for you guys as a duo, for you in everything you're doing. And I agree, content is always important. And I'm sure you're going to crush that as well. But speaking of, if you need content ideas, I'm sure you can come up with some great videos from the swapped input tournament that's going to be on the team that you are also doing with Aydan.
That's
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch, man. That's on Tuesday, so I'm excited to see if you guys can go back to back and win that event as well. Smit, thanks again, man. I scrolled back through our DMs of like the first time we were DMing, and at least the last conversation I can see on my PC was originally talking to you about moving you up for a potential tournament that I had coming up as one of the like top performers or something like that, because this was right after that 20 KD tournament that you had, which kind of went sort of viral. It's been cool, man. That was over a year ago, which is crazy to say because I had even seen you play like before that. So full year of watching you compete, and I'm sure we'll have more than at least a couple years ahead of us. So thanks for popping on the podcast, man, and we'll keep you updated on more conversations. I'm sure we'll have you back on shortly after a few more wins.
All right, sweet. Sounds good. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, peace, brother.
Later.
All right, Gojj. It's about that time.
Woo! All right, Katie.
I don't like Shooter's Digest, but it's going to be a Shooter's Digest.
It is a Shooter's Digest. I want to... Can I hard pivot before we lose all of Smit's people? Can I hard pivot really fast?
Only if you reference friends in the positive.
If I reference what?
Oh, you let me down with the pivot.
I'm sorry. Look, listen. We had such an interesting conversation with Smit about competitive Warzone. I want to make a hard shift about the future of Warzone briefly and talk about that tweet I sent you with ALGS, because we'll come back to the Shooter's Digest stuff. We have some drama we want to talk about briefly before we end the podcast, but so there was a tweet, folks, and I don't even have the link for it right now. I could probably find it, but it was essentially that Apex in general viewership is at an all-time high. Game players are at an all-time high. The game's been out forever. And one of the major reasons for that we were kind of talking about off stream was that, you know, Warzone's been on a decline. People have gone over to Apex, but in particular, Newbz, right? Like Newbz is this figure that has brought a massive like cult following, if you can call it that, or even whatever you want to call it, infam following, family following, just general following from the competitive side over to Apex. They've been, you know, being very ingenuitive with the way they've integrated updates and stuff like that, and also ALGS is an actual competitive game mode. So what I was wanting to talk about, Katie, future of competitive Warzone. We talk about how Activision maybe is a bit more content forward with their events, and we also talked about how customs are slow paced and campy, right? And people don't like that right now. If you watch the ALGS, it is incredibly slow paced and insanely campy. I mean, there's 20 teams that can load into a lobby, and you have 15 teams in the final circle. Okay. So I want to briefly mention this new Apex wave that has happened. And let's have like a brief conversation about why can't Warzone do the same? What would be the limiting factors from a Warzone competitive tournament game mode that we're missing, right? Because it's not, camping is not the problem. It seems to be the way fights happen, how fast people die, maybe. Like, do you have any thoughts on that topic for like if we were to truly make a competitive Warzone tournament or a competitive Warzone league, like an ALGS, like what are the limiting factors for that for Warzone?
Well, I think the main thing here to touch on the first part of this is that I don't actually really think that competitive Warzone and ALGS are comparable right now, because for one, it is a bona fide esport that has everything an esport entails with it, which is why I would say ALGS players are pros.
Yeah,
They
sure,
are Apex
absolutely.
pros. I do not put the same title for competitive Warzone players because, again, there is the structure there and the kind of go-ahead approval from the kind of IP owner, if you will, and the kind of company as a whole, that they want ALGS to be in esport. We have not received that from Activision, and we may never receive that. So until that happens, it's just not a comparable thing, because the content aspect of it at that point will always be a part of every tournament that happens, and it'll always kind of be a tug of war between people who compete in this and want to have it be competitive, and people who want competitions to have that nice sprinkling of fun content aspect to them. So until that happens, it's always going to kind of be a maybe not the best comparison, but you can look at ALGS and see what could Activision do with Warzone. It could become like this. And I think just so many of those basic features, Gojj, I sincerely think, at least from a viewership perspective, some of the basics for whether it's codcasting, whether it is that flying free camera, whether it is our ability to have those heat markers on the map when you're looking at it to see where people are dropping, features like that might be available elsewhere, I think provide so much nuance that a lot of the things we're saying, well, what are we missing? Why are things worse for us in a competitive aspect? A lot of those small things really add up when you add them into a broadcast, that I think would solve, I think, a lot of these issues that we might be having. But in terms of also the style of Apex and how you play out an Apex map win is just completely opposite of how Warzone's even played. Like, yes, they're battle royales, but the way you play them and the way you win them is way different. TTK is a huge thing, right? Like in Warzone, I know that they've addressed that they're trying to manage TTK creep. That is unintentionally, it is getting faster and faster kill times. And that's not necessarily what they want. They're trying to do adjustments for the fact that TTK has gotten a little bit too high. We've seen things like adding more health, so on and so forth. Well, in Apex, the TTK is way slower. It's way harder to kill people and get those team wipes in Apex than it is in something like Warzone. So again, I think a lot of it can just be really hard to find those comparisons.
Sure.
But when it comes to Warzone, again, just some of that quality of life stuff, I think, would make these discussions a lot easier to look at. It's just so many small things that are missing that would really chunk away at why competitive Warzone, whether it's in customs or kill races or otherwise, feels so far behind what Apex has.
Right. Well, it's definitely behind. I guess the real question that I was having was, like, if we had that support, could we replicate, quote unquote, the success that ALGS is having? Now, to be totally fair, I don't know what the books look like behind the scenes for ALGS. I don't know what the returns look like. I don't know anything like that. I'm only looking at CCVs, and I'm only looking at, like, player growth in the success that the players are having from, like, a promotion of the game. Promotion wise, it's fantastic for Apex, there's no question, and nobody will argue that. I don't know what the back end looks like, right? Like, it could be more akin to something like the CDL, where you're like, are we in the black? I don't know. Probably not. Like, I have no clue. But at the same time, I think that what you said was really crucial. Even if we had all the support that Apex had, can Warzone survive as a competitive title right now? I don't think so. From a, like, true competitive, like, organizational, we're running a comp scene, $1 million prize pools, like, it is treated like a professional game, because I think the RNG in Warzone is so much higher than Apex 1. Number two, because TTK is so much lower, the skill gap is very difficult for a casual viewer to perceive. And so when somebody kills somebody else in a customs game, It doesn't look like a skillful kill, and usually it doesn't take as much skill. It comes down to the only real skill that you can attribute to like high level Warzone right now is positioning and timing. To be honest with you, like gun skill doesn't really move the needle in customs all that much, especially when you're playing a more campy style customs rather than like a kill race style customs with kill multipliers, etc. You know, I'm getting some DMs from some people that maybe play on the slower side of things and are really good at that positioning, and I could see them succeeding at a professional level for Warzone because of positioning. But what Apex provides is this sort of like high TTK use abilities, that kind of stuff that Warzone will never have. If we increase the time to kill in Warzone, and maybe we increase the speed at which circles close, and it forces players to make more drastic decisions to influence the way they play the game, you could see a similar style competitive Warzone format. But I think, you know, from our perspective, the things we want, custom, game settings and caster modes and heat maps, like I think that's all valuable, but I still don't know if we could replicate ALGS style format. I want to say that something like a Rebirth competitive format with organizations behind it could actually be more successful.
Far more feasible. Yeah. I agree. I think if you're talking about a actually competitive Warzone format, Rebirth is really going to be the game mode type where you could turn that into reality. But let's also be clear, guys, most esports don't make money.
Yeah,
esports is not profitable, and what it does do though is get a lot of players wanting ideally to play the game and retaining the player base. A lot of these companies are going to look at esports and say, does this esport, for example, League of Legends, does watching Faker play and T1 be the best in the world, does that get current players to continue playing the game? And does it get new people wanting to try out the game? The answer is yes. If the answer is no to both or one of those things, that's going to be a negative incentive for them to want to invest in something like this. And I think that's what Activision's trying to figure out right now, too, is the question of, is content-focused competition in Warzone going to bring in more eyeballs and more users and more money than actually full-on competitive Warzone?
Yep.
Now, I think they're trying to sample that out right now with CDLR, right? The first opening of CDLR, this was really a litmus test for them of how is this going to be received? What can we improve on for this? Is there a value add to having something like CDLR, which does have the opened to general population for buy-in, if you will? They have the opportunity to play and compete within this, and then also having that competitive side of CDL pros and the competitive Warzone players themselves. So I hope to see them continue to iterate on that with the Rebirth format, which I agree is 100% the most viable kind of customs format to make it high octane, maybe more competitive, less campy, if you will. But it's always going to be that struggle as well from the very high level aspect of, is an esport seen as a value add for a company? And if it's not seen as a value add, they're never going to lean into it because there's just no reason to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, hey, does our esports scene filter into our marketing budget, right? Like, that's the idea. It's like, it is a marketing plan to get people playing the game. And I'm not going to shout out any specific people, but like Katie, you and I were on podcast last week, you know, really building out a competitive rule set, or trying to, maybe a soft push of like, hey, tournament organizers, use this format if you want a competitive rule set, right? And there were some people out there that were saying, look, you know, this is not worth our time because we are, you know, the tournament should be more content forward and focused, because that's what, you know, casual players want to see. Casual players want to see players using everything that they use, shotguns and RPGs and that kind of stuff. Like, that's what actually matters in terms of pushing players back into the game, which I see that perspective. Do I agree with it? Not entirely, but I do see that perspective, which is what we've been talking about. So I wanted to take a brief segment to talk about that, Katie. Let's get into some Shitters Digest stuff to finish it off. We only have a little bit today. Usually Shitters Digest is one of our major sections. It's a little bit of sleepy on the timeline. So if you guys are at home listening and you're a Warzone competitive player in the Warzone competitive scene and you'd like to spice up the timeline, feel free. It makes our jobs way easier to talk about drama.
Go shit tweet someone.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a couple things though.
There have been a couple things. I will say we did actually have some spicy Shitters Digest that would have been viable for last week, but we had the player summit, so it's just old news now. But no, to kick things off, I mean, to kind of stay on that beat of the JoWo tournament, Battle for the Crown 2, and day 1 of that was that kind of the big talking point is in the first tournament JoWo hosted, Scummin and Irrational, one had a captain spot. They were able to play together as one of those consistent duos, and they got 4th place. This time around, and I'm not sure why, neither of them received a captain spot, which means that it was impossible for them to play together, which was... I can't speak to it because I have no idea why. I don't know if it was an oversight, if it was intentional, if that's just how the cookie crumbled with bringing in other people to the tournament, and they just assumed, hey, they'll get picked up anyway, so they will be included. I don't know, but it was an eyebrow raise for me that you have so many of these set duos, like the Aydan zSmits, Tommy's Almonds, etc., and then you have Scummin and Irrational who can't play together. And not only could they not play together, they had to play each other in round 1 of this tournament, and it ends up being Swish and Scum who get eliminated by Gary. And it's a really tough spot for them to be in. Again, I can't speak to why, but it was kind of a head scratcher for the fact that they couldn't play together.
Yeah, it didn't seem like the tournament was formulated where it was like, hey, we need to spread out invites. We need to invite smaller people as well as big people. Like, it was mostly big duos with a couple random people, quote unquote random people, sprinkled in for whatever reason. I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that. We can only conjecture from the sidelines, but yeah, I mean, it's not like Scummin and Irrational are not like B-tier duos to invite. It's like, oh, we only had 8 duos that we could invite. Like they're on that list. Like Scummin and Irrational are both top 10 earned in Caldera. Like there's no they're one of the top duos. When you think of duos in Warzone, specifically Caldera, you think of Tommy and Almond. When it comes to 2v2s, you think of Tommy and Almond. You used to think of FIFA and Jukies. You think of Aydan and zSmit. You think of JoWo and Bread, and you think of Scummin and Irrational. And Scummin and Irrational are near top of that list right now. Scummin has been ripping Caldera apart in every single format. So it was bizarre to see them not get a captain spot, and I don't know what the appropriation was of captains, but yeah, they had to play with separate people. Irrational made a fairly decent run with his duos. Scummin, of course, got knocked out by Irrational at the very beginning. Irrational was playing with Mutex, but very odd from the tournament side of things. But that's how the cookie crumbles. And what was surprising too about this was, like, it would be different if it was like a one-off event. This is a 3-week event with the same duos every single time that don't swap. And that was what I was super curious about, was like, why did they not run if it is a 3-week event where you have like a interesting format week 1, interesting format week 2, and then like a normal format week 3 with most of the prize pool, why didn't they run a total of 16 duos in week 1, 16 different duos in week 2, and have like a basically top 8 from each, then go into week 3? Like, I don't know. I was surprised, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, again, guys, we don't have the background information from them. I did ask for clarification to say, like, are captains changing? Are people like Scummin and Irrational going to get to play together? And they said no, that those captain spots, what's going on is set. So again, we don't know the answer to this. Maybe, again, they just had a list of people they wanted to invite, and some duo had to end up getting the short end of the stick, and unfortunately it was Scum and Irrational. We'll wait to see what happens with the rest of it. Again, Swish and Scum, Mutex and Irrational, those aren't bad duos, right? They can certainly make an impact, but I will say, especially on day 1, you have to wonder how brackets shake out if Scummin and Irrational could play together. What ends up happening to teams on their side of the bracket, which would have been teams like Biffle and Super Evan and players like that. So we'll have to see what happens with the rest of it. But something else that was a little curious, and we touched on it with zSmit, was that Huskerrs and Newbz were back together. Huskerrs did get a captain spot for the tournament, and he picked up Newbz. They did break up, but They haven't, and I don't know how much Huskerrs has really been trying, but they have not been successful in trying to find new duos that work for them. Now, Newbz did play a tournament with Scummin that Scummin was supposed to play with Gary, but ended up playing with Newbz and wanted to do a trial run of it to see if, who knows, maybe Scummin and Newbz were the hot new thing. Didn't do very well. It doesn't seem like they are duoing again. I think it's still Scummin and Unrational back together. So Huskerrs and Newbz, you know, you can try and break up, but somehow you find each other back together once again. And it was a poor tournament result for them. They lost map 5 to Aydan and zSmit, but that really does not tell the story, right? They are one of the only teams that got Aydan and zSmit to a game 5. So yes, they got first rounded in this, but they lost to the team that won the whole tournament. And again, aside from Super Evan and Biffle in the grand final, only team to take them to that map 5. So it wasn't a bad showing, but I don't. Where do they go from here? Do they just start sticking together again?
Well, I know it's super funny because like I was sitting here thinking like, you know, we had done some conjecturing of where they could go anyways, and like when you start looking at the competitive landscape right now, it's fairly limited unless you're going to take a huge risk, right? Unless you're Aydan, you're going to take a risk on a guy like zSmit who had proved himself time and time again, and then they became a duo. Like if you're Huskerrs and Newbz, like who else do you even go to? Like there's not very many options when it comes to quote unquote big names. Again, I think they should take risks on people like Skullface, on people like you know, Sage or whoever, where you duo up with somebody on the smaller side and let them grind and really prove themselves, and they might work with you really well. But Huskerrs and Newbz like split for a second. We're like open to all options. I can only imagine their DMs weren't full of the people that they wanted them to be full of, and they go, nah, let's get back together. And it was also
right, because like so many of these people that they would want to play with is not going to be an option for them unless for example, I saw Unrational tweeting out today like, hey, I need a duo for this thing because Scummin can't play in it. Like unless you have a situation like that where someone like Newbz would snap up Tommy or Almond in a second if one of them couldn't play.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
But I agree, it's hard when you're someone like Newbz and you are a hot prospect on the market and you're available for pickup, but that doesn't mean other potential hot prospects are available for you to play with.
Well, I think like I mean I like Huskerrs a lot. Like I don't have anything against him at all. Huskerrs is just in a position where he's not going to go pick up somebody small and like take a risk on them necessarily, because that's just not really what he does right now. He doesn't need to compete. He does it for fun. So like he doesn't want to go out and like play with somebody new and like get a bunch of chemistry with somebody small and then like, you know, finally start winning more tournaments often. And to be fair, it's not like he's not winning right now. Like he and Unrational and Scummin just won 2 massive Rebirth tournaments back to back, right? Like it's not like they're not winning, but when it comes to 2v2s, we haven't seen Huskerrs win in quite some time. And so he's not going to take a chance on somebody like a Sage. But like when you start looking at like the top Caldera earners right now, like the people that need to have somebody take a chance on them in terms of like big players, if they don't duo up with somebody else small and just start, you know, running the tables, are the people that I've already mentioned for the most part. I mean, Mayapo is always floating out there. If anybody really wants to start doing with him on 2v2s, man's top 11 earned right now on Caldera. You've got Zamza that's in the conversation inside the top 15. You've got Inveiled, you know, give or take, of course, any accusations that have come his way, which mostly unfounded. Skullface is in the top 20. Even Wars, really, I mean, they have consistent players they compete with, but like those are the people that you need to start picking up if you're trying to split up, if you're Huskerrs and Newbz, and look at. I mean, even Stukawaki is not really having a consistent duo that you know, he's playing with every single time. Sage, top 22. Vap's not really playing anymore. I mean, Colors doesn't really compete that often, but he's in the top 30. Slack's now into the top 30, but plays with a consistent team. Like, those are the names that you need to start targeting. But Huskerrs isn't going to do that. There's no way. Newbz, maybe, but I neither of them are very what I'll call it competitive hungry, like an Almond or a zSmit or even a Jukies is. Like Jukies took Hisoka under his wing and said, hey, let's run the tables, because he knows how talented he is, right? And that's kind of the duo going forward, should, you know, EU hosts and things kind of clear up going into the future and Jukies be free and he's not playing with FIFA. Like, I don't know. Those are the conversations to be had around 2v2s for those duos. It's just
ever done a 2v2 before?
What'd you say?
Have FIFA and Newbz ever done a 2v2 before?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, it doesn't sound like a duo that's played together that often, but they have played together in customs. I know that for a fact.
I would love to watch FIFA and Newbz.
You could have FIFA. Yeah, you have FIFA IGL. He's one of the best IGLs in the game right now, and have Newbz play a little bit more aggressive. Maybe Newbz isn't a hyper aggressive player. I think FIFA needs a hyper aggressive player to compete with, which is why he and Juki's ran the tables for so long from the EU side of things. But I don't mind it either.
I think here's the thing: is basically, I think that Newbz and Huskerrs face a situation that I find similar to Jowo and Breadman's situation, specifically in 2v2s, not anything else that involves trios, quads, whatever. Specifically in 2v2 kill races, I think they are a very good duo together. I just don't think that those duos, aside from maybe the off chance, will ever consistently find wins together, specifically in the 2v2 format.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, I also don't think that there is a viable alternative for Huskerrs or Newbz that is drastically better, or an upgrade for them, of free agents, if you will. So
Sure.
Newbz wants to find someone else. Huskerrs, they're all happy with doing that, whatever. But they don't have, I think, alternatives that are objectively better than each other. The alternatives that would be better are not available to them because they're already in set duos. So
or not consistently, available.
Not consistently.
Yeah.
And this is the thing: these guys want consistency, right? They do not want to be playing hopscotch and seeing, oh, which square do I land on today? Oh, that's going to be my. No, they want a set person. So, do they just get back together? Like, it's a tough position because I think they did this test where they went their separate ways, and I think both of them may be a bit surprised at the lack of prospects.
Yeah, maybe so, or just not willing to take the risk, like we mentioned. Kind of last thought I have on that. This is kind of the Gojj, analyst coming in because we've watched so many 2v2s. Things that I'm seeing that are successful from the 2v2 side are, of course, chemistry. So I'm going to use Brawlic and Exact, for instance. I mean, 4 and Jace is kind of their third for customs, but those two guys they have similar play styles. They both play fairly consistent, fairly strategic. They don't necessarily like crazy frag out, but they can win 2v2s and do really well in 2v2s because their chem is great. And Brawlic can take that more aggressive stance when he needs to, and vice versa. Kim is everything. So if you can build Kim with a duo, you can win. It is possible. But the other thing that we see often in 2v2s is the ability for a player like a zSmit to play a bit more of a strategic and stay alive game while fragging out and getting kills along the way, and then having another person on the other side that plays the hyper aggressive. We can put Unrational and Scummin in that mix as well. Scummin fries, he is very good at surviving, but he plays a hyper aggressive role. Unrational can play a little bit of a slower role to make sure he buys back. The great 2v2 duos, Super Evident Biffle, same kind of circumstance, are the teams that can immediately buy each other back and mitigate the power positions. You and I talked about that on broadcast over and over and over and over. When I look at Newbz and Huskerrs, I see two players that can get a lot of kills when they need to, but I don't see hyper aggressive fly around the map players, and I also don't see or hear fantastic, really aggressive comms where both players are backing each other up and one player's like playing that IGL role and telling the other person, we do this, and you follow it without question at the later half of the game. Again, in 2v2s, you don't have to communicate all that much, but the hyper successful 2v2 teams have one of those two aspects: insane chemistry or perfect weaknesses and strengths together, if that makes sense. And so if you're looking to succeed in the 2v2s, you need to find somebody that complements you well, so that you can be successful, or you need to just grab somebody and just ride or die and work on it for the next 6 to 8 months, basically, to have a chance at winning some of these events. That's the way it seems from our perspective, at least.
Well, right, and it's just hard too because I think for them, there are maybe slimmer pickings than they thought there would be if they started looking for a new duo. And on top of that, not only were there maybe not non-ideal options available to them, but committing to attempting to kind of build that chemistry with someone is it can be really risky, right? Because how many tournaments, how many opportunities, how much money are you willing to lose?
Yeah, right.
To determine whether or not that duo is going to work. And by lose, I mean, how many tournaments are you willing to go into accepting that you're probably not going to win on the foundation that you're trying to build, the synergy and chemistry of this duo that you're testing on? And a lot of these players don't even want to take that risk, right? They don't even want to put themselves in a scenario where they might not win the tournament because they're working on winning future tournaments with someone. Everyone wants to get the duo that they can believe that they can win in that tournament with right now. So it's hard. Like, where do they go from here? Honestly, I would think that they would just start playing together again. I don't know, and maybe be kind of putting out feelers in the meantime. I wonder if it's more of a position of, hey, get back together with the understanding that you want to find different partners and have those DM conversations with people while you still have that set duo. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a tough position for them.
Yeah, or have, really Newbz maybe break out of his shell and go, yo, fly, and let's try a slightly different play style, or really just, from our perspective, we can only conjecture. From their perspective, they can go back and watch VODs and say, okay, why are we losing some of these? Is it unlucky? Is it we're not making the right rotations? Are we not getting enough kills? Like, what are the things that are actually limiting us? And let's build from there. Those two players probably aren't doing a ton of VOD reviewing for 2v2s, right? Like, they've been playing for so long that it's like second nature to them. You might need to with Caldera, right? It changed up their flow. They were winning a ton in Verdansk, and they're not winning as much in Caldera. So what do we need to change to win in Caldera? There's probably some key factors to that. So something to think about for sure, but a lot of fun to conjecture about. We'll do a lot more conjecturing about duos and teams and stuff, especially as the competitive scene continues to grind. Hey, and that's the value proposition for Twitter tournaments as well. Go practice and play in those in order to gain chemistry. But Katie, I think we hit most of our topics for today. I had a blast talking to zSmit. I had a blast kind of hearing his story, where he's thinking he will go next. Any kind of like final thoughts before we close this thing out?
Final thoughts. Not really. I mean, honestly, I know that podcast was delayed this week, but so glad that we got it in. I think zSmit, everything he said, really valuable. Guys, again, just to let you know, as we saw Darth in chat, we will have the VOD live presumably tomorrow with everything all time stamped out, all nice and pretty for you. But no, we've got a lot more Warzone ahead of us. Still 2 more days of the Joe tournament. Got some other goodies in the works, but super excited about it. And as always, guys, if you have suggestions, people you want to see on the podcast, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. You can hit us up on Twitter right now. It is Grandmaster Gojj on Twitter, as spelled out, as all of my socials are Grandmaster Gojj. And for Katie, it is Worlds Bedford on Twitter and Instagram, and Katie Bedford on YouTube and Twitch. Go check out her streams as well. She's a killer League player. But I think that's all we've got. Look, I had a blast. Katie, thanks for joining me as always. Thank you again to zSmit for joining us on the podcast. Excited to bring on some more guests. We have some very fun, exciting guests to bring on in the next couple episodes, so stay tuned for that. And like Katie mentioned, we have a lot more Warzone we're casting today. Katie and I have probably the busiest month ever, by the way, casting together as a duo this month, which is so fun, and we're casting all types of different titles. So thanks for supporting us in our endeavors together, casting, podcast, otherwise. And excited to continue to grow. Thanks for 50 subs on the YouTube. If you guys are listening via audio, you guys have been showing us support on Spotify, iTunes, write reviews, do all the good things for us over there so that we can continue to grow the pod. And if you're a sponsor looking to sponsor us, hit us up on all the Twitters and socials. Last thing for me, big update coming to Warzone earnings as soon as either tonight or tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. You're going to be able to see Verdansk, Rebirth earnings, all of that good stuff that everybody's been waiting for. Excited about those updates as well. I think that's all I've got, though. Hey, thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next week on Wednesday, I believe, with a new guest. So stay tuned. See you guys later. Peace.